A lot of news broke this past week about the conference scheduling and plans for the upcoming season in 2020. That's what we're discussing in this video. Thank you for clicking on this video. You are a good sport. This is College Football Media, and on this channel we talk college football teams, trends, and traditions, all the way to logos, history, and predictions. If that sounds interesting to you, consider subscribing for in-depth college football content. I'm filming the video for this week a little bit later than usual, but I'm going to try and still get it up on Tuesday. It might be a little later, hopefully not too bad. But also in the coming weeks, I might have to change my schedule up later in August, so just keep an eye out for that. Especially once the season starts, things could vary a lot on this channel, so just wanted to let you know. A couple of weeks ago, you might remember me making a video about +1 type scheduling, and I called that from the beginning because the ACC announced having a 10-game conference schedule +1. So they will play 10 games within the conference. Notre Dame is included, which is very, very interesting in its own right, and then they will be able to have one non-conference game depending on each individual team. When that news broke, it seemed like the ACC was extending an olive branch to the SEC to still be able to play the ACC versus SEC 4 big rivalry games. Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and of course Kentucky. The games within those states. So they extended an olive branch to Notre Dame. Notre Dame graciously accepted. They extended another olive branch to the SEC, and the SEC just slapped it down, stepped on it with their foot, and crushed it. Because not too long after that, the SEC announced a 10-game conference schedule, and that was it. No +1. They had the opportunity to do so. I feel like they could still have worked something out, but they just said no. We're going conference only, and that is just a big slap in the face to the ACC. Now, the ACC has released who is playing who. They don't have dates set yet, but they do have who has home games against their opponents and the away games against their conference opponents. The SEC has yet to do so. I think they are in currently talks of which plan they're going to go with for who the rest of those teams will play within each other. But the ACC has released more information. Of course, Notre Dame is involved. They have a complete conference schedule. They are all in one division, so they will take the top 2 teams' winning percentage to go to the ACC Championship in Charlotte, which it is still. That game will be pushed back either December 12th or 19th, something like that, and Notre Dame is eligible for that conference championship game. When you look at the schedule itself, I think the team with the best opportunity per se would be NC State, because they don't have to play the big boys. They don't have to play Clemson nor Notre Dame. North Carolina, on the other hand, I think plays Notre Dame, but they do not have to play Clemson. And so prior to all of the announcements and pandemic and everything, North Carolina was being looked at to perhaps get that shot of making the conference championship game. They did not have to play Clemson in the regular season, and they still don't. So that's great news for North Carolina. They still have a good shot at this. But now that Notre Dame is involved and it's just the top 2 teams, Notre Dame obviously has a very legitimate shot at making the conference championship game and perhaps winning it. Clemson still has to travel to Notre Dame during the regular season, which will be a very fun and interesting game in and of itself. But a lot of things to watch, a lot of teams to watch. So looking forward to the ACC very much this year. And I think they're one of the earliest to start. They're still wanting to start in either early September or maybe even going to week 0 in early August. That could be still remain to be seen. But overall, the ACC will be beginning about a month prior to the SEC. So the SEC, on the other hand, has not announced opponents yet. I think they, like I said, are still in discussions for that, but they are 10-game conference only. And they announced that their conference championship game will still be in Atlanta, but pushed back to, I think, December 19th. That's only 6 days before Christmas. which is insane in a lot of ways. But they will push back the start of their season to late September, I think. There's not as much information on the SEC currently. Of course, it could be released by the time before this video, or maybe just hopefully after, within the remainder of this week. Now, the Pac-12. This should be a fun one. The Pac-12 has released their opponents, the schedule, and I believe the dates associated and attached to each game scheduled. They've moved a lot of the rivalry games around where they are not concluding the season, but rather earlier, sometimes in September. I think that's the case for the Arizona schools and the Los Angeles schools, that they will play in September. Some other rivalry games maybe in October, and basically not to finish up the season. That could be most likely because if the season has to get cut short and you have to cut some of those games off at the end of the season due to the pandemic or players being out, not available to play, things of that nature, that you've already played those games prior. So that could end up as a big benefit for the scheduling that the Pac-12 has released. Hopefully, again, we want all of the games to be played, but that all remains to be seen. They also are on a 10-game conference-only schedule, so that means for each Pac-12 school, there will only be one other team that they do not play. For how the schedule shakes out, I think not too much has changed. I think Oregon and Utah was added, which potentially could be a big game, but I would still look for Oregon to dominate in the North Division. Perhaps maybe Washington can make a run. In the South, you still have Arizona State and USC mainly to watch, and those should be fun to see as well. Now, perhaps, I don't know if bigger news you would classify it as, but definitely bombshell news about the Pac-12 talking about basically a players' union forming, where the players, certain players, not all, but some players, all within the Pac-12, came together and kind of tried to give a list of requirements or needs or something in order that they had to receive in order to be willing to play this season. I don't know the history of how many times something like this has tried to happen or tried to form in college football, but if it has, it hasn't gone well. Of course, there's a players' union in professional leagues, but there's not such in college football. And so far, it hasn't seemed to be playing out too well for those Pac-12 players. Some of the players that have tried to join that, let's just call it a union, on the Washington State football team have been dismissed from the team and basically not being able to play. So not good for those players. I don't think anything else has happened for other players. I know a Stanford player has come out and talked about it. I don't know his situation with the team or anything like that. But this is interesting. Players are trying to take power, take control, and I don't think it's only because of the pandemic. I think it's a little bit more and wider range of just trying to have more rights or benefits or things of that nature. And really it is a lot of benefits if you look at some of the details of what they are demanding. So that is really big news and could affect college football for the next 10 years, 5 years, or just forever, depending on how this goes or what is formed in the future because of what is started now with the Pac-12. Could it lead to power conferences trying to leave the NCAA? That's a far-fetched possibility, but nonetheless still a possibility. Or is it tied into the name, image, and likeness deal that's should come out sometime soon within the next couple of years within the NCAA that they're talking about right now? All of that, again, remains to be seen. There's not a lot of answers, but it was big news that broke and really was them trying to demand and form a players' union within the Pac-12. Then the last conference to announce anything about their scheduling was the Big 12, and they are playing a 9-game conference schedule plus one. So 10 total games for each team. Of course, they have 10 teams in the conference, which means you can only play 9 teams in a conference-only schedule. That's what they do anyway. And so they're going to continue to do that. But then they'll have the opportunity for a +1 non-conference game to get their total schedule to 10 full games. So obviously nothing has changed in who is playing who, but they have finally announced and come out with some information for the Big 12. So that leaves 2 power conferences that have announced a +1 schedule, the Big 12 and the ACC. I thought the SEC would be involved in that. Of course, they are not. So will the Big 12 and ACC try to form something together, maybe a challenge or something like that? Not sure. That still also remains to be seen. They could all just leave it up to the individual schools and tell them to schedule whoever they want within themselves. Or maybe there could be a pact formed between those 2 conferences. Again, remains to be seen. Not sure how that'll go. I would think it would probably end up being more of a school initiated thing of you just kind of do your own thing for your non-conference. Some might get scheduled, some may not schedule one at all. So, of course, this season is going to be crazy in and of itself, but more dominoes are starting to fall, more information is coming out about who is playing who, things of that nature, and so we're talking about schedules themselves, which is a good thing, and we're not wondering if the season is going to be played. The last bit of news that I'm going to talk about in this video is what you might have heard just the other day. The Rock, along with an ownership group, it wasn't just The Rock by himself, but him with another ownership group, bought the XFL. They just purchased the league, and that news came out just the other day. Kind of took me by surprise. I'm sure it took some of you by surprise as well. So yeah, the XFL is not dead, I guess is the best way to put it. So The Rock, they purchased the league. He's now a league owner. I think it's the biggest thing The Rock has done. The Rock used to play at Miami and then went to WWE, of course famous for wrestling with Vince McMahon, who started the original XFL. Then The Rock went into Hollywood, movies, the Titan Games, which was the biggest probably television thing he's done, and now is an owner of a football league that has very strong roots in wrestling. So very interesting story there. A lot of storylines. I'm sure things will continue to come out about the XFL. Very interesting organization, very interesting league. And I'm very intrigued to see what happens to the XFL in the coming years. Can they put a season together by spring of 2021, or will they push it back a year to 2022? I think the latter is more likely, but again, not sure. The news just broke the other day that The Rock now owns it, so the XFL is not dead. Something will happen with it. We just don't know what, but very interesting to see. Former Miami player, wrestler, The Rock, very famous, very well known, now owns the XFL. So thought that news was interesting as well, and we'll see what comes of the XFL in the future. So, thank you for watching this video. If you haven't already, hit the like button if you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing for in-depth college football content if that is something that you would be interested in. Check me out on social media. You can watch some other videos right over there. So thank you for watching this video all the way till the end. This is College Football Media. Until next time, be goody now.